10 players to stash before week 5 of the NFL season kicks off. This is Beat the Waiver Wire. We're getting closer and closer to our goal of 1,000 subscribers, so if you're new here, please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. So the first player I want to talk about is Malik Washington. Of course, Hill surprisingly only missed one game during his tenure with the Dolphins. That was week 15 of 2023, and in that game, Waddle had 8 receptions for 142 yards and a touchdown. Now, that was the year that Tua led the league in passing yards, which he's clearly not ever going to do again, but obviously we're talking about Malik Washington here. And if you look at his snap percentage, he's been getting on the field at a decent rate even before the Tyreek Hill injury. Now, he is primarily a slot receiver. He's been 45% in the slot this season as well as last season. And this is a little bit concerning because the Dolphins do run a lot of 21 personnel, but that's kind of negated by the fact that they run 12 personnel at the lowest rate in the league. And what I'm kind of getting at is, don't be surprised if we see Nick Westbrook-Ikhine in a lot of 2 wide receiver sets, but Mike did allude to this is going to be a committee group to try and replace Tyreek Hill. And what we're looking for here out of stashing Malik Washington is a very specific role. And of course, that is some variation of the Jonnu Smith role from last season. And looking at Malik Washington's prospect profile, he absolutely dominated his final season in college at the University of Virginia. He led the FBS in receptions, was second in receiving yards, third in yak, in first and forced missed tackles. He kind of plays like a running back with the ball in his hands, and you do see that they do get him involved on the ground as well. And if you are a fan of PFF, they actually had him graded as the number 2 receiver in the class, only behind Malik Neighbors. But the overarching point is we don't know exactly how this offense is going to be designed without Tyreek. And especially in a deeper league, I think taking a flyer on what could be a very solid role with Malik Washington is worth a shot. And this one might sound like a little bit of a stretch, but if I am a Devon Achane owner, I'm actually pretty inclined to handcuff Malik Washington to him because obviously Achane's role is so heavy in the passing game. And if he were to miss time, I think we're going to see Malik Washington take on even a bigger share. Ollie Gordon isn't a pass catcher and Jalen Wright has been awful. I know that sounds a little bit backwards to think about handcuffing your running back to a wide receiver, but kind of just a thought. So add Washington to the end of your bench just so you can take a look and see how this new offense looks without Tyreek Hill. Next guy up is Isaiah Bond. So there's a ton to unpack here with the Browns. Flacco is getting benched for Dylan Gabriel. Shedeur is doing some weird mime stuff in the locker room. I guess I digress. I honestly thought that they would go one more week with Flacco to not have Gabriel's first start be overseas against a Brian Flores defense, but here we are. And then looking at this Browns wide receiver room, Cedric Tillman, he was one of my favorite late round sleepers this year. He got off to a good start and unfortunately lands on IR. In terms of Jerry Jeudy, we got a ton of pushback having Jerry Jeudy as our wide receiver 37 heading into the season. We saw him in the top 20 in a lot of places, but maybe at this point 37 was a little bit too high. But even removing all that, we've seen Bond's route percentage increase week over week. This past week, he was at 71% route share and 58% route share the week prior, which is notable because even though he was on the field slightly less, he was on the field for more passing plays. And Bond isn't an out of nowhere player either. He ended up being a UDFA for off the field stuff, but was projected to be a day 2 pick. And he was also a complete idiot for saying he was going to break the combine 40 time record and then ended up running a 4.39, which is still fast. And he's very fast, but he put himself in a no-win situation there. I'm sure you guys watched a lot of Isaiah Bond, at Alabama and of course at Texas this last season. But this role with Bond feels a little bit like less of a projection than Malik Washington, who I talked about previously, because Bond was the team's leading receiver this last week. And I think looking at the Browns overall, there's a chance that Njoku gets traded, which could free up even more targets on the team that's thrown the second most passes in the NFL so far this season. And, I would have included Fannin on this list for that exact same reason, but he's at like 61% rostered at this point. So if he is available in your league for that exact same reason, I would definitely take a stash on him. Moving over to the running back position, first guy up is Kendre Miller. So Kendre Miller was a solid prospect coming out of TCU, but for whatever reason, Dennis Allen just absolutely hated him. Now we get a new regime under Kellen Moore, and he's starting to carve out a little bit more of a role. We've seen an increase in snaps and touches week over week, and he had a nice game against Buffalo this past week, 65 yards on 11 carries and a score. And, when we talked about Woody Marks on this episode last week, that felt more as if he was going to just take over the lead role from Nick Chubb. And with Kendre Miller, that doesn't feel that way to me whatsoever. This feels more like a tryout / limiting Kamara's touches to keep him fresh. So Kamara has a little bit more trade value, right? Like the Saints are 0-4. They're playing solid enough. I think they've bought in to Kellen Moore, and Rattler has been probably better than a lot of us expected, but they're also jockeying for the number 1 overall pick next season and should be accumulating as much draft capital as possible. Kamara signed an extension last season and has a year left on his deal. He's made it clear that he wants to be in New Orleans, but he's also 30 years old. And if the opportunity presents itself to join a contender, it might make too much sense for both parties. But if I am the Kamara owner, I would definitely make Kendre Miller a priority, not just for, the typical handcuff purposes, but if Kamara does go to a different team, then you might be looking at having 2 number 1 running backs. Next guy up, Brashard Smith. So we talked about him last week on this episode, but I think it's important to bring him up again because it was kind of more of the same in terms of inefficiency from Kareem Hunt. 34 yards on 13 carries against a Raven defense who is actually one of the worst units in the league right now. Pacheco is RB42 on the season and finally got his first touchdown of the year. Of course, it was through the air, and that duo has combined for 2 total touchdowns through 4 weeks. The Chiefs are invested in neither Pacheco nor Hunt long-term. Pacheco's on the last year of his rookie deal, and Hunt is on a 1-year contract. And we know Brashard Smith is an explosive playmaker, right? Like he's a 4.39 guy. He's converted from wide receiver to running back when he transferred to SMU, and really was a big part of why SMU made the college football playoff last season. And this past week, we see him get more involved as a pass catcher, 3 catches on 4 targets for 47 yards. And if that's going to be his role moving forward and he continues to get more involved on the ground, he's going to have a ton of value in this offense. And now we're getting reports this week that Brashard Smith is expected to see more involvement moving forward. So I would kind of put him in that Woody Marks category from a couple weeks ago, where we're kind of slowly seeing this increase and hopefully potential takeover. So I would definitely prioritize Brashard Smith in your leagues. Next guy up, Michael Carter. So Emari Demercado is probably the person here that I would prefer to have, but he's owned in over 50% of the threshold, which we like to use for this. And I think with Michael Carter, this is simply zigging when everyone's zagging or zagging when everyone's zigging, but we don't know exactly how this situation is going to unfold while Benson is out. So I think it is worth a speculative add if you do have the bench space. But I will say with Arizona, it's not like the Cardinals have had much success rushing the ball with Connor or Benson. So I think the more likely outcome is that neither of these guys are the ones you want to start, but you never know. And Carter had a couple decent games in week 17 and 18 last season, but looking at those games, 13 carries, 70 yards, 17 carries and a touchdown. However, in those games, Connor, Benson, and Demercado were out. So I think while everyone's kind of rushing to grab Demercado, it might make sense to just take a look at Carter and stash him on your bench. Last running back up is Rico Dowdle. So Chuba Hubbard is considered day-to-day with a calf injury. I am recording this Thursday morning, Germany time, so it's like maybe late Wednesday night in California. But maybe we're getting more news items by the time you watch this, but especially if you are the Chuba owner, try to get Dowdle on your team. And looking at Dowdle, like not only has he carved out a bigger role the last couple of weeks, 10 carries, 9 carries, a couple receptions, but looking at last season when he finally got going in the latter half for Dallas, he kind of went off, and I won't say he was a league winner by any stretch, but look at these carries, 19, 22, 18, 25. So he was very valuable in fantasy. So to me, that proves that he can handle a very big workload. So keep an eye on the Chuba Hubbard news, and they do get Miami this week. So if Hubbard is out, he could be a plug and play. And then they get Dallas next week, who has an awful defense in a revenge game. So I kind of like this as a sneaky stash. If you're watching this on Thursday, before maybe we get some more Chuba news, it might be worth just throwing them on there. If Chuba's good to go, you can cut him, no big deal. Kind of similarly to what we saw earlier in this week with Rachaad White, right? Like we were getting reports, Bucky might be a little banged up. You want to make a speculative ad on White, maybe throw a lower dollar bid before really we get more news that he's in a walking boot. So that's kind of how I would be playing this. Don't get carried away with Rico Dowdle. Don't spend a bunch of fab. But if you have Chuba, I definitely would make him a point to get on your team. And, maybe we'll see Trevor Etienne get more involved in this offense. He did get a little bit more runway this last week. Trevor Etienne as a prospect is kind of interesting because you'd watch some games and it was like, oh my gosh, Trevor Etienne is awesome. He's better than Travis. And then you watch some games, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's horrible. And so I don't really know what to think of Trevor Etienne. I've got him on one dynasty team on my taxi squad as kind of just a wait and see approach. I don't necessarily love that because this team will have Jonathan Brooks hopefully coming back sometime next season. But who knows with that. Moving over to the tight end position, first guy up is Mason Taylor. So he's had no issues getting onto the field as a rookie tight end, but the last 2 weeks we see 6 and 7 targets. Last week catching 5 of those for 65 yards against the Dolphins, and that's one more target than Breece Hall in that span. And why is that important? Because he's becoming the number 2 or 2A or 2B in this offense in terms of targets. And to put that into context, Tyler Johnson has the second most targets at the wide receiver position on this team with 6. 6 targets through 4 games to their top wide receiver behind Garrett Wilson. And even if the Jets pass at a very low rate, for a deep league, all you can ask for is being the number 2 target in an offense at the tight end position. Not to mention he's more of an athletic pass catching tight end. So this is a guy that I do think his role will continue to improve in terms of target share. And maybe I'm wish casting a little bit because I am stuck playing him this week in a deeper league where I have Tucker Kraft on bye. And for whatever reason, my league mates in that one love rostering 2 tight ends. So wish me luck here. Next tight end, Theo Johnson. So this is a super deep league play. If you are hurting at tight end, we've heard the request to have a lot of deep league players. So trying to accommodate all audience. So I think with Theo Johnson, you can do worse than an athletic tight end that should see an uptick in targets with Malik Neighbors gone. He had 5 targets last week and caught one of them for a touchdown, and Dart only attempted 20 passes. So it's technically a 25% target share in that game. And I think with Dart, if you guys have been watching throughout the offseason and the draft process, I'm a huge Jackson Dart fan. It was horrible to see him get his first win because I'm a Chargers fan, so I didn't expect that to happen. But as a Jackson Dart fan, it was good to see him look good. And I know 2 things to be true with Jackson Dart and rookie quarterbacks in general. Tight ends are a very nice safety blanket for those type of players, and Jackson Dart is definitely going to have to throw the ball more than 20 times per game moving forward and in a lot of those games. So I think if you're looking for a role increase, obviously with Neighbors unfortunately being gone, I think you can do worse than Theo Johnson. Moving over to the defenses, we've got Cleveland Browns. They are only 33% owns, and this is one of the top defenses this week. So I would make them a priority because you can play them this week and next. This week, they get the Vikings in a game that has the lowest under-over total on the week. Next week, they get the Steelers, and in those division games, they're often low scoring. Plus, they should be able to sack Rodgers a couple of times. And not to mention, Cleveland is also just a really good defense. So if you're the type of player that likes to target good defensive units and kind of just take your chances with that in the talent, Cleveland is definitely somebody that I would be targeting, and I have them in a league that I'm starting this week and will plan to start next week as well. Next defense, Las Vegas Raiders, only 2% owned, so I guarantee you can definitely add them. And this is just a game of picking on the Tennessee Titans. I would love nothing more than for Cam Ward to hit his stride and start playing well, but this team hasn't given us any reason to believe that's happening anytime soon. Cam Ward leads the NFL in sacks taken, and that team has scored 3 touchdowns through the first 4 weeks, which is just abysmal. And if you look at the fantasy point totals for each defense that have faced the Titans thus far, week 1, the Broncos scored 17 fantasy points against them. Week 2, the Rams scored 11 against them. Week 3, the Colts scored 18 fantasy points against them. And week 4, the Texans scored 13 fantasy points against them. And those are sleeper fantasy points. I know ESPN sometimes does it a little bit different, but you get the idea, double digits for all of those units. So last guy up, kind of a bonus player for our Superflex audience and our Deep League Superflex audience, or our Superflex players that are in a little bit of quarterback hell. So Jameis Winston opened up as the number 3 quarterback in New York. So we knew from the get-go it was going to be Dart once Russell Wilson eventually got benched. And there is one place I have in mind that makes him appealing as a stash in Superflex. And of course, that team is the Cincinnati Bengals. I think with the Bengals, we're one more bad Jake Browning game away from things really spiraling in Cincinnati. And yeah, maybe Browning looks better as a passer this week against the Lions, but they're not going to win that game. So if we do see a Jameis Winston trade to Cincinnati, he's going to be a big add. You know, we've seen over the course of his career, we know what the Jameis Winston experience is at this point. And for this reason, that's kind of why I'm hesitant to sell like my Chase or Higgins shares, because if Jameson does go there, those two are going to go absolutely nuclear. But this is definitely wish casting, and this is definitely a know your roster type scenario. If you're a super flex team that has Allen, May, and Stafford as your number 3, congratulations. You're probably already in the playoffs and no need to stash Jameis Winston. But if you're rolling out Trevor Lawrence and Cam Ward and Bryce Young and things like that, I think he's definitely worth an ad. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.